always scored against United. I don't know why. I love playing against them. It must have been Paddy. I like putting the ball past Paddy, I think. Everybody knew that if you did well against the Warnock team, he'd try and sign you at some point. People say that to me all the time. They say the line. They come up to me and they don't say hello. They just go, "That's must get that." If you're going in to see the gaffer before you get in to see the boys, you're being dropped. So walk into the office. He goes, "Sit down, son." So I sit down. He goes, "You're never going to believe this. My wife had a dream last night." Yeah, just talking about that makes my hair stand on him, because it was like she'd been born a few days before. And I'd said to Neil, I said, "I'm going to score today." I didn't think I'd score a header, but I said, "I'm going to score today. I can just feel it."
This is the Sheff United Way podcast.
We'd now like to give a big Sheff United Way welcome to a Barbados international winger. I haven't actually ever said that sentence before in my life. A man who represented our beloved Blades between 2005 to 2007, a big part of the promotion season to the Premier League, and now enjoying life on the other side of the world in coaching after playing there. For us, we are saying good morning, but for you, good evening, Paul Ifill. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you, fellas? All right?
Really good, thank you, mate. It's fantastic to have you on the channel. Where are we speaking to you from?
I'm in New Zealand. I've been here since 2009. And I'm in a little place called Woodend. I've just moved from the North Island to the South Island with a coaching gig. So I've been down here since January.
Oh, what's it really like?
It's beautiful. Well, you can tell, I suppose. I came out in 2009 for a year. And we're talking in 2022, and I'm still here. So it went pretty well from the football side of it, but in terms of the place, magnificent place. It's one of them that I think if you come and visit, you then try and find a way to get out there permanently. I'll talk about that later, but nearly everybody that's visited me now lives here. So I've got no family to move back to in England anyway, pretty much. So I'd have nowhere to stay if I did come back.
Well, I think we're going to start backwards with this one, aren't we, Nick? Which is something we don't really do. We normally start at the beginning of a player's career, but we're so interested in where you are at the moment. So we are going to start backwards for this one. But how did you begin your adventure, as you mentioned, in 2009 in New Zealand? How did it all start?
Yeah, I'd just come into the end of my career at Palace. I'd had a couple of years there after obviously leaving Sheffield and been injured time and time again. Obviously, Warnock was coaching then. He did offer me another year, to be fair to him. It was on a little bit less money than I was on. And I just felt like I was... It would have been taking advantage of an unfair offer, in my opinion. I hadn't done enough at Palace. I hadn't played particularly well. Never really sort of hit my straps, and like I said, too many injuries. So I was searching for something or a place that I could go where it was less games, probably less stress. So I was trying to get into the MLS, but trying to get in them was difficult. If you weren't a real big name, they were looking at proper marquees at that point, and I probably could have got there, but it was just putting the too hard basket. And then I was in the gym one day as usual, injured, rehabbing, and Nick Carl, who played for Palace at the time from Australia, said to me, "Would you fancy going and playing in the A-League?" And I said, Australia's a bit far for me. He said, "Look, don't rule it out. It's growing. It's a decent level. Money's pretty similar, and you can live near Bondi Beach." And that sounded quite cool. But I said, "I'm not really keen." He said, let me just pass your number onto my agent. He'll give you a call and let's see what happens." So agent called me, said, "Look, I think I can get you something with your CV. Would you want me to put it out there?" So I said, "Yeah, look, why not?" I had nothing really in the pipeline, and the season was nearly at an end. So he did so, and rang me back a few days later and said, "Look, I've got a club for you, Central Coast Mariners." And I was like, "Great." He showed me the pictures of the ground, and if you've seen the ground, it's unbelievable, picturesque, nice little stadium, and you can literally see palm trees on one end of the ground, and then there's the beach. There's a road, and then there's the beach, and it's beautiful white sand. It's amazing. And I thought, I could see myself playing there. So I agreed to the deal. It was a marquee deal. Similar in the money to what I was on. There's a little bit less, but I wasn't too fussed about the money at that point. I just wanted to go and play somewhere different and do something different. So sold up at home, had a party to say goodbye to friends and family. Everything was done. And the day that I was flying out, I get a phone call from the agent. The deal's off. I'm like, "What do you mean the deal's off?" I said, "It can't be off. I've got nowhere else to go. Like we're going." And he said, "Oh no, look. Long story short, but the owners of the Central Coast Mariners are Sheffield United, or the part owners are Sheffield United. So one of the directors of Central Coast Mariners called the director at Sheffield United and asked about you. They said, we're signing him as a marquee. You know, any thoughts before we get this done? And they said, look, don't sign him. He's injury prone and potentially liable to go missing. So that was it. Deal was scuppered. And I still to this day don't know who that director was. I've got an idea, but I'm not sure. So the deal was done. So that was me. So I went back had to ring the people that I'd binned the lease on and taken, can have a little bit of extra time in the place, and they were okay to let us carry on. So we back to that. I had nowhere to train. Went back to Millwall, my old club, and I was training with them for a little while. They wanted to sign me, and that all fell through as well. And then Brighton came in for me, which is where I'm from. They wanted to sign me. Then that didn't go so well because I didn't really want to go there because I felt it was a little bit too low at the time. They were in League One, and I still felt that I was a bit better than that. So it was just nothing on the cards for me. And the agent rang back again and said, look, we've got another deal in the A-League. And I said, okay, cool. He said, would you fancy going to Wellington? And I'm like, where's Wellington? And he said, it's New Zealand, but it's not far from Australia. Similar weather, similar climate, blah, blah, blah. So me being a little bit daft, looked on the map, realised that New Zealand was quite close to Australia, assumed it would be the same sort of thing. So I said, look, let's make it work. Let's have a go. So I said to my missus, let's just go for a year. See how it is. If I do well, I can get a transfer to a club in Australia. If I don't do so well, we can come back and we've had a year away and done something different. And that's it. And I'm still here in 2022. So it went better than we ever expected.
Yeah, and you've played for a few teams over there as well, haven't you? And are you thinking about staying there for good?
Oh, we're here for good. I can't, like I said, I can't go back. I've got no family back home, no immediate family, so I'd nowhere to live. It would cost me too much to come back. So, mum and her partner are out here now. My sister's out here. My wife's family are out here. Her brother's out here. So, everybody that's come out and visited has loved the place and tried to find a way to stay.
I love hearing that. I mean, I'm thinking as well with what you said about a Sheffield United director not saying the nicest things about you. I'm actually starting to worry, Nick, that this might be the first player we have on that doesn't say their favourite ever club to play for was Sheffield United. And I think Paul might lean more towards Millwall, and that's probably quite fair after that. But we'll get to that.
He did spend like 17 years at Millwall and played about 700 games. I've just had a look at how many games, and wow. You played, what was it, about over 200 games for Millwall?
Yeah, 230 something, 234, I think.
That's right. I was looking at it earlier. Yeah, not that I'm a stato. So hopefully I got this right, but tell us about the appointment to the coach of the Samoa women's national football team.
Yeah, so obviously since I retired from professional football, I got injured at 33. I ruptured my Achilles at 33, did the rehab to try and come back. But by 35, about 16-ish months later, I had to retire. The doctor told me that I'd never play again. I'm still playing. I'm a player coach, so he got that one wrong. But at a lesser level, playing in the National League here in New Zealand, which is pretty much the highest you can do, but certainly not the same as the A-League over here. But whilst doing that, I was obviously started sort of my coaching badges and my coaching journey at 35, and I look back and I went into coaching thinking that it would be easy, and it's so different. I had no idea. I still feel sometimes today that I have no idea, and I'm 7 years on. I think the thing with coaching is there's so much to learn, and it is so different. So it's very different to football. I think you get to a certain point in football and feel like there's only a little bit more you can get out of yourself, whereas coaching, every day you're finding out you don't know too much, and it's quite humbling, which is quite cool as well, because you know there's so much more to come. So I'm kind of in the middle of that, and on that journey, did a few decent things at a couple of clubs, and I coached women's football for the last 5 years as well, which a lot of certainly ex-professional men don't tend to do. I kind of fell into it, thought it was something I'd never do, and then kind of fell in love with it, to be honest. And because of that, and probably a past playing and career that I had, the opportunity came up to coach the women's Samoan national team. And I was umming and ahhing about it, but when they said that there's an opportunity to play at the World Cup because New Zealand, as they're hosting it with Australia, don't have to qualify. So it means that there's an opportunity for an island nation for the first time to actually make it. It's still a really tough road. You've got to win the Nations Cup, which is a month away from now. And then if you win that, you go through to another tournament of, I think, eight to 10 teams. That'll be the likes of sort of Thailand, Nigeria, the lesser the lesser team supposedly, and then if you qualify from that, you go to a World Cup. But just for the nation to get to that next tournament would be massive.
Sounds like some very exciting times for you in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So before we come back into England and go to the start of your career, I want to go completely off script, and I want to ask you, I was going to ask this earlier on, but there was no place to ask you. But before we get back to this country, have you been to Bag End or any Lord of the Rings places in New Zealand?
I actually haven't. I used to play at a club that literally drove past the Weta Workshop every day, and all the bits and pieces sort of related. We've just never done it. I think again, you take it for granted. And it's same as, I suppose, living in the UK when you don't go to Europe too often. I look back at all the things I didn't do, and all my friends over here are going, "Oh my God, you didn't go to there. Why didn't you just not get on a flight or on a train?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right." So our plan is at the end of this year, if we get a chance to do all of those bits and pieces, but also get a camper van and go from Auckland all the way down the North Island and then all the way down the South Island, which we've toyed with for years and not quite got round to do it.
Paul, can I become your best friend?
We'll both come and visit you.
No problem.
We'll definitely make
that. Nick, you want to see all Lord of the Rings stuff, don't you?
I do. I really, really do. Definitely.
Yeah, I only watched those films because of Nick the other day. I'd never seen them.
Love them. Love them. Anyway, let's go to somewhere a bit more glamorous than New Zealand, Brighton. So you grew up in Brighton. Were you born in Brighton?
Yeah, born in Brighton.
Yeah, born and raised in Brighton. Where were your connections to Barbados then?
My father is from Barbados. Yeah, he moved over. I think he was 4 years old with my grandfather. My grandfather came over, I think, to drive buses when there was a shortage of bus drivers in the London area or the surrounding areas, and they went off to the Caribbean and said, "Look, new life over here. Come and have a job," and he ended up coming over. And then my grandfather got into double glazing when it was first starting and had his own company. And did pretty well, actually. And so went from bus driver to owning his own business, which was pretty cool.
Well, when we talk about your club career in England, many will assume you started at Millwall, as that's the team you're known for. But you actually had to begin the hard way in non-league. So tell us about the early rejections, going to college and combining that with your football.
Yeah, I was at Brighton as a kid. I don't know, 12, 13 years old, maybe. It used to be called the School of Excellence then. And I was there with a couple of mates, and we used to go on a Monday night, and it was not too much coaching. You turn up and a little bit of coaching, but mostly five-a-sides, and you'd be knocking around. And it was good fun. It was nice to be able to have a tracksuit and say you played for Brighton. And I'd been going for about a year, and I can't remember what had happened in the session, but they stopped it to make a coaching point, and one of the coaches went to me, "Son," and told me to do something. And I looked at him and I said, I'm not your son. And he said, "No, it's just what I call everybody." And I said, "You don't know my name, do you?" And he sort of had this funny laugh. And I thought, I've been here over a year and he doesn't know my name. I said, "I'm clearly not making any kind of impression at this club." So my two mates who I was with felt the same. And we got together with our parents and just said, "Look, this is just a waste of time. It's petrol. We weren't from a wealthy family. It's petrol getting us out there. There's no future at this club. Let's do something else." So I left and went and played non-league football. My other mate, who was a goalkeeper, he left and became a golf pro a couple of years down the line. And then the other lad is a guy called 𝐍𝐸𝐵𝐿𝐵 from and his brother actually played for Brighton, but Joe ended up playing professional rugby and now lives in France as a professional rugby coach. So the three of us kind of went on different journeys, but it was the right timing to leave the club at that point. I ended up playing I had a time at Watford as a schoolboy, did quite well there, got let go, told that I was never going to be a pro, wasn't quite good enough, which tends to be a lot of people's stories, I think, as pros later on. You look back on those rejections. I dealt with it badly to start with. Mum talked me around to get back to playing because I'd had enough, didn't want to play anymore. She talked me back into playing. A couple of years later, I was at Saltdean, which was just a local club sort of in Brighton, and I had a really, really good group of people there, good coach, good chairman who really looked after me as a sort of 16-year-old that was sort of still trying to find his way. And there was a guy called Dennis Burnett there who used to play for Millwall, and he was one of the coaches, and he just took me and another lad under his wing, really, and said, "Look, I believe that you both can play pro. This is kind of what you need to do." need to work a bit harder. You need to listen in and learn your craft. And if you're doing that playing men's football, people will start taking notice. And kind of by the end of that season, he said, look, I think you've both done well enough. I'm going to take you on trial to West Ham. So we go to West Ham, playing a game. I think it was against Bishop Stortford, who were obviously non-league club, still are. And we played, and it was 6-0 at half time. I'd scored a hat trick, and my mate had scored a hat trick. So they pull us off at half time, and we're both sat on the bench going to each other like, quietly. Surely that's got to be enough. Like, what more can you do? And I'm sat right next to the coach, and all he could talk about was this other lad that was just about to come on. And we were 16, and this lad was 14, and it was Joe Cole. And Joe Cole came off the bench, and he did things that to this day I couldn't do because I'd probably injure myself. He was absolutely ridiculous. He was that good. I went home and I wrote his name in massive letters on my wall because I thought this kid is going to be an absolute superstar. I couldn't believe how good you could be at that age. So anyway, that was the end of the first trial. We did get invited back. Or sorry, my mate didn't. I got invited back for the next trial. So the next trial we're playing Leyton Orient. So we turn up and play. The first team had just finished on the pitch beside us. So we win 1-0. End of the first half, I get the ball just in our own half. I take on 4 players and stick it in the top corner. It's one of the best goals I've ever scored. The first team are chanting, sign him up, sign him up, sign him up, right? So I'm now thinking 2 trials. I've done everything I can. Surely this is it. Come off the pitch with Dennis, the guy who'd taken me up there. We talked to the gaffer and the chief scout and say, look, what we doing from here? And they were like, look, we just don't think he's better than what we've got. So Dennis and the chief scout and the coach start arguing. I'm just stood there like feeling like an idiot. They're arguing over why I should or shouldn't be signed. So didn't get signed, and I actually go around speaking to clubs about this line of rejections, and I've got a print out of the team that day, and in the team was like Frank Lampard, Joe Cole, Ferdinand, Carrick. It's ridiculous. So they were absolutely right in what they said. I wasn't better than what they had, but at the time it was very, very tough to take. And again, went away, decided that football wasn't for me, and had a sulk up as I normally do in these situations. Mum took me round again, back to Saltdean again, and just started scoring goals in the first team. And as a 16-year-old, when you're doing that in non-league football, teams tend to take a bit of notice. And I got offered 3 trials. So Portsmouth, Newcastle United, and Millwall offered me trials. Went down to Portsmouth. This is the days before mobile phones. Get to Portsmouth. It had been raining all day. The game had been called off, but nobody had told me. So that was pretty devastating for my second ever trial. That was that done. So Millwall called me. Would you like to come up? My dad couldn't take me, but the chairman of the club, Saltdean, said he'd take me up there. So we drove up there. I didn't know what pre-match meals were at that point, and he said, "Do you want something to eat before we get to the ground?" So I said, "Yes." Yeah. So we stop off at like a garage. I'll get a Mars bar and a can of Coke, and that's my pre-match before my big trial. So
sounds like Jamie Vardy.
Yeah, it worked all right for him, didn't it? So we turn up, and it's against Crystal Palace, and I look at the lineup of this Crystal Palace reserve team. It was, and in it was Bruce Dyer, and Bruce Dyer had just become the first £1 million teenager, and I'm looking at the list, and I'm thinking, I am miles away from this. It's going to be so hard. So we went out and we played. We were getting beat, 2-3-0. They were way too good for us. And it was way out of my depth. I was miles off of the level. And with about a minute, maybe 30 seconds to go, the big centre-back went to pass the ball back from the halfway line. And he kind of slipped as he did it. And I was through on goal from the halfway line. Now, I don't know if you play at all, but that is the worst thing in the world. You've got too long to think about it from the halfway. I was normally a decent finisher, but I'm running through and I'm thinking, this is my moment. So much is going through my head. I'm thinking, right, I'm going to go around the keeper. Then as I get closer, I'm like, no, I'm going to chip it. And then, I might just whack it. And then last second, I'm just like, right, no, just get your foot through it, head down, just whack it. So as I got to do it, it takes the tiniest little bobble. I try and hit it as hard as I can. I completely miss the ball, fall over. Like I've got dirt in my face, grass in my hair. Just a mess. Final whistle goes. Literally, I'm still on the floor when the final whistle goes. Get up, get changed, go into the after match, which is upstairs in the director's box. And by this point, my dad had turned up, and my dad's a Caribbean guy, absolutely, shows no emotion ever. And he just put his arms out and just give me a big hug. It's probably the only hug I've ever had from him in my life, and it was one of them hugs to sort of say, "Look, you messed this one up, son." So the chief scout and the head coach come over and say, "Look, start speaking to me. Thanks for coming up. How do you think you did?" And I'm like, I'm miles away from this. Look, I apologise for wasting your time and blah blah blah. And they went, "Oh, look, we'd like to offer you a year as a scholar." And I'm pardon? I couldn't believe it. I said, I don't understand why. And they said, oh, look, we knew this would be way out of your depth, but we came to watch you play for Saltine a couple of weeks back. And they'd come down to a game, and the coach had dropped me for that game. So I was on the bench for Saltine, and I was absolutely livid because I knew teams were coming to look at me. So there was 3 of us. My mate who'd been on the trials with me and a goalkeeper. So my mate was crossing balls in for me, and I was just hitting shots at this goalkeeper. The chief scout and one of the coaches were sat in the car watching this. And I was so angry that everything I hit was just flying in, left foot, right foot. It was just one of them times I just didn't really care. So they'd seen me that day and seen enough that day to know that technically I wasn't bad. So what they wanted to see was whether, if the chips were down and it was a difficult situation, whether I'd be able to, dust myself down and get back up. And all I did in that game was run around like an idiot, lose the ball, win it back, lose the ball, win it back. I kept giving it away and it was rubbish, but they just wanted to see if I had the attitude. They felt that they could coach the rest, and that was it. They offered me a deal there. The biggest problem was I was a Newcastle United supporter as a kid.
Of course you were.
That was the last. Yeah, from Brighton, of course.
So close in proximity.
Yeah, exactly. Geography. So I go home, and my mum and dad are buzzing. I'm on the verge of being a pro, and all I can talk about is the Newcastle United trial. And they're like, "Look, you can't go on trial and take a trial over a contract." And I was trying to talk them around, and eventually they got their way, and they were right. They said, look, Newcastle too high a level for you at the moment. Go to Millwall, try and get that professional contract at the end of the first year, and work your way through. And it worked. They were right, as usual.
Absolutely fantastic. I love that story about him watching you in the car, because Scott, you wouldn't have thought that. You'd have just been playing.
I say that. When I coach now, I say that to the kids I coach all the time. Like, you never know who's watching. Like, you see kids get the ump, you toss the training off or not do what they're supposed to do, and I always stop it and go, listen, and I tell the bit of the story that can happen to anybody. You just need to hold high standards if you can, as often as you can.
In the movie, that isn't how it would happen. Of course, in the film, you wouldn't be in the car park being scouted. You would round the keeper in the last minute. You'd score a great goal. Your dad would run on the pitch and give you a hug, and all the players would lift you up. And that's how you get signed, because that's what would happen in Hollywood. Your story is one I've never heard before. And I think that is probably why you are such a good coach, is that you'll probably be able to relay these kind of stories and people go, well, he's been there. He knows exactly
I think so. I think it's I always try and be an empathetic coach and think back to what would I have felt like, because, I've not been coaching for that long, but I speak to people now. I've been, I think, 7 or 8 years, and guys that I coached 7 years ago, and they can remember all sorts of conversations I had with them, all sorts of stories that I don't even remember telling. And they're like, oh yeah, I don't play football anymore, but I still remember that story, and it led me to go to do this. And one of them's a journalist now, and he's like, I learned so much in the academy, and a lot of it was the stories that you told. And you think, God, our words as individuals are so powerful at times when you're in a position like that, but you don't realize it all the time.
That's incredible. I love to hear that.
Yeah, for me, I've had players go pro from my academy. I've had players go off to university and play in the States and do some amazing things, play for their country. But honestly, the guy that told me that I'd helped him become a journalist was like, wow, who would have thought? It's, that's pretty inspiring. And he tells that story now to the people he works with. So you never know where you can take something from, take the time to listen to people.
Absolutely. Now, let's kind of move a bit further forward in your career, because what was it, 230 odd games for Millwall, but we don't care about that. We just care about the 40 odd games that you played for Sheffield United. So how did that move come about, Paul?
So we, as we spoke about a little bit off air, I always scored against United. I don't know why. I love playing against them. It must have been Paddy. I like putting the ball past Paddy, I think.
We can't get down into the corners, can I?
No, that's right. And he was always so angry about it, because he'd always be on the verge of a clean sheet. Like I said, it didn't matter what the score was, I'd always score. So a couple of times he was 4-0 up probably, and I'd nick one late and he'd be very angry. But I think everybody knew that if you did well against a Warnock team, he'd try and sign you at some point. And we played him. We played him in the game where it all kicked off in the tunnel, which you've probably gone over a few times with different people. And he was super angry with me that night.
He said it's the famous line, isn't it? It's a
Mate,
famous line.
People say that to me all the time.
Oh, sorry.
All the time. No, it's fine. But they say the line. They come up to me and they don't say hello. They just go, must get that. Right. So, yeah, I get that. They get that all the time, which is quite funny, to be fair. But
Do you know when he came over to shake your hand, were you expecting him to say, "Oh, well played, lad"?
Yeah, absolutely. and I didn't get to that point. But after that had all happened, he did pull me aside and said, "Oh, well done. I'd love to sign you one day." And I thought nothing of it. And then we played him. I think it was the following season. I'm not sure with the dates, but I think it was the following season. We played him the last game of the season. Sheffield had just missed out on the playoffs. We'd finished maybe 2 places behind them. We beat them at Bramwell Lane, last game of the season. There were shouts for Warnock out and all that stuff. And he pulled me after the game and said, "Look, if I'm still here," he said, "I'm going to sign you." And I said, "Okay." But I'd heard it before from different managers and I thought nothing of it. So we'd gone home. A couple of days later, I think we were having the end of season do at Millwall. And one of the directors came to me and said, "Look, Sheffield United have just put in a bid. So have a couple of other teams. I think we're going to have to let you go. We need the money." And he said, "I think you should go and speak to Sheffield." So I was like, okay. So went up with the missus to Sheffield, had a look round, met with Neil. He took us out for dinner with his wife, had a great time, kind of agreed to the deal. But I was in the background speaking. Yeah, it was.
Neil's got that way, hasn't he? Neil can talk anyone into it.
He told me what I wanted to hear. I was happy enough with the deal. And then I'd gone home again, same old thing, said bye to everybody. I was moving up to Sheffield. And then I was getting on the train. And then I had a phone call from Mark McGee. And Mark McGee was my old coach at Millwall. He'd since gone and Dennis Wise had taken over. And Mark said to me, "I hear you're going to Sheffield." I said, "I'm literally just leaving now." And he said, "You can't sign." I said, "Why?" He said, "Look, there's a bigger club coming in for you, but I can't tell you who it is." I said, "Look, you need to tell me more than that." I said, I've kind of agreed here. And he said, "Look, my mate's got a job." I said, "Who's your mate?" And he said, Gordon Strachan. So I'm like, Gordon Strachan at the time, I think he just left Southampton. And I'd played against Southampton the year before in the FA Cup and played really well. And Strachan did pull me aside after and said, "Look, I'm going to monitor your progress and blah, blah, blah." So I'm thinking, right, where's he going to get a job? He said, it's a bigger job than Sheffield. So I'm thinking it has to be the Premier League then. And I'm thinking,
not Newcastle.
Well, no, that would be a killer. That would be a killer. No. So I ring my agent after I get off the phone to Mark and I say, "Look, this is what I've just heard." And he said, "Look, we can't go on ifs, buts and maybes. You told me to get you the deal. This is what the numbers are. Let's go. You've got to go." So I went up and signed, over the moon. And then the next day in the papers, it was announced that Gordon Strachan had become the head coach of Celtic.
I knew where that was going.
Yeah, no, a little bit, guy. But for me, I'd already decided that I thought Sheffield United would be able to get to the Premier League, and I always wanted to play in the Premier League. I didn't want to play in the Scottish Premier League. It would have been nice, that you get the Champions League up there every year, but I wanted to play in the Premier League. So I do tell that story quite often, and people are like, "Oh," but I wouldn't. I don't think I'd have given it up. I was happy with the move that I'd made.
Yeah, and you're on the Sheff United way. We're not the Celtic way. So you made the right choice.
Exactly.
I think it's time we spoke about your debut, because so many players we've spoken to on this channel say, when we say, you played Shrewsbury at home, and they're like, "I don't even remember that." But there's no way anyone can forget your debut, because I think it was probably the best debut we've ever seen at Bramwell Lane. 1 goal, 1 assist. Two penalties awarded to you, we'll say. So let us in on how you felt after the game.
Yeah, I'd had a pretty good pre-season, and the boys were great. I've got to know them well, and I trusted Neil, and he basically told me what I wanted to hear. I'm the final piece of the puzzle. I think he said the same to Neil Shipley and Danny Webber and everybody else he got in. But he always made me feel like I was the best player at the club or the best player in the league. And I think that he was very, very good at that. He wasn't necessarily amazing tactically, but certainly I always felt like I would run for a brick wall for him. And we were buzzing to play that weekend. I remember the boys were talking about it, saying, like, if you do well in this game, you're going to be all over the papers, because the Premier League hadn't started. So, we were the biggest league to go. So all my friends and family had come up. I think I'd leased a box on the other side of the ground that day and everything. So I was just ready to go. It was ready for me, and it started quite well. I had a good matchup against, I can't remember who the fullback was.
It was Leicester City at home, isn't it? We should say.
Leicester City at home. I can't remember who the fullback was. An Irish lad, and from the first couple of minutes in the game, I realised I was too quick and too strong for him. So it was like, right, get me the ball. Obviously won the penalty pretty early on, which I'm not sure was a pen, but yeah, it certainly wasn't a dive, but I'm not sure it was a pen. So that started us off well. And then I think the second one, was. So I think it was
a handball, wasn't it?
It was a handball. Yeah, I'd played the ball into the box, and then Cabs had sort of got onto it, and I think there was a handball there, and then he took the pen for 2-0. I scored a header for 3-0 from 𝐍𝐸𝐵𝐝𝐻 cross, who'd just come on, which was a magnificent cross. It was not a bad header at the near post.
Yeah, I think you're playing your header down there a little bit, mate. It was fantastic.
No, but I can't head the ball. So it was honestly, it was one of them. I just thought I'm just going to get to the front post. I'm going to put my head somewhere and hope it goes in. And it was hard to miss because of 𝐍𝐸𝐵𝐻's ball. It was such a good ball, and he was such a good crosser of the ball. Fantastic player. And then the last one, I remember getting it out wide, beating the fullback, and just kind of putting it in the box. And you watch it back, and it looks like I've picked bombs out because it goes right between keeper and defenders, but I didn't really. I just put it into an area, and Broms managed to get it. I think he chested it into the net in the end. It was right and right, sort of took the keeper out completely, and that was 4. And again, next day in the paper, Ifill towers over them all, and blah blah blah. And I've still got the cuttings. Mum kept all the cuttings, so I do flick over that and try and force it on the kids every now and again.
That's brilliant. I assumed you've called every house you've lived in Eiffel Towers.
Yeah.
Neil Warnock, what are your memories of working under Neil Warnock?
Oh, look, Neil was good. Like I said, not fantastic tactically, but he had other people to do that. He was good at delegating responsibility, and he knew what he was good at, and he was good at the man management. And I always explained it like this: if you wanted me to run through a brick wall for Neil, I would do it. If you asked me to pass around it or over it, I wouldn't know how to do it because he didn't give us any of that. But we had in the championship, certainly he recruited really well. We had a better team than most. And I think that sort of got us to where we needed to be, and everybody wanted to play for him. And we had a good sort of team vibe and culture, I suppose. He was really smart at knowing when we needed a bollocking or an arm around the shoulder or a piss up or extra training or no training. He just seemed to always get it right. And I don't know whether he was speaking to a senior leadership group or the captain or what, but when you needed a day off, it always sort of came. Or if the boys who were travelling up from London needed a couple of days, he'd give it to them. It was just, his timing was always really good. So in terms of that, I loved it. Obviously, it didn't go so well for me later on in the Premier League. And I felt I should have got more of an opportunity, but I also understood his reasoning behind it too. When I first signed, the boys had said to me, be careful because his wife has dreams. And if you're in the dreams, right? And I'm like, yeah, because you always get told stupid stories by people when you come in because they're just trying to suck you into doing something. So I'd been told that the first league game of the season, you always wore your best suit, right? So I turn up in my best suit, but I have my tracksuit in the bag, and I walk into the changing rooms, and all the boys are in their tracksuits. I'm in this bastard suit. Yeah. So I thought, they're just trying to mug me off. Thought nothing of it. And we played, it was the game against Sheffield. So it's a Sheffield derby, and on the Thursday or whatever, I'm in the team. No, Friday, I'm in the team. We play on the Saturday. I'm driving into the ground. I'm buzzing to be playing in my first derby. And the phone goes, and it's Tony Daly, he was strength and conditioning coach at the time, fitness coach. And he said, I need you to go and see the gaffer. He wants to see you before you get in to see the boys. So I put the phone down. I turned around to my missus and said, I'm being dropped. And she went, what do you mean you're being dropped? Who was that? I said, that's Tony. She went, well, you don't know that. And I said, babe, I've been in this game long enough. If you're going in to see the gaffer before you get in to see the boys, you're being dropped. So walk into the office. He goes, sit down, son. So I sit down. He goes, you're never going to believe this. My wife had a dream last night. I start laughing because I'm thinking, the boys are in on this. Like it's a big conspiracy. Like he's just going to mug me off here, and everybody's going to laugh. And he's like, I'm gonna leave you out. I'm playing Quinny. And I'm like, and I'd played all the time in front of Quinny. Quinny was a great player, by the way, but normally he sort of played on the left or he played in the middle. Sometimes he played on the right when I wasn't playing or out of form, but I'd played most of the time ahead of him. So I said, I don't understand it. He said, look, I don't want to go too much into it, but my wife's had a dream and I'm playing Quinny. I'm going with Quinny today. So I'm like, I was fuming, went back into the change room. Boys asked me where I'd been, told them. They're cracking. They think it's the funniest thing in the world. So I'm absolutely fuming.
Have they heard this before then?
They'd heard similar before. Before. The boys that had been there knew of it. I didn't know anything of it. So Quinny's there looking all awkward. He's obviously been put in the team, and the boys are cracking up thinking it's the funniest thing. I had no interest in being involved in that game in the slightest. So I'm sat on the bench with an absolute face on, looking like sad sack. Game goes on. We end up winning 1-0, and Quinny gets the winner. So I was sat on the bench, and all the way through it, I was thinking, I'm going in to see him on Monday. I'm not having this. I'm going. And then Quinn scores the winner. So I couldn't even go in and say anything. I'm like, well, what do you do in a situation like that?
Sharon knows.
Sharon knows, exactly.
Neil Shipley nearly helped you out by trying to block it on the line, though.
No, I remember. Yeah.
Well, he can't really get out of the way, can he? Let's be honest.
No, true.
Have you watched the Neil Warnock documentary? Obviously, it was before you came, but one thing always sticks in my memory about that is the fact that at the end of that documentary, it says, "You lot should have been a lot higher. You should have been in the playoffs. I'm going to bring in some players that are going to do this," and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He stood by it, and he did, and he went out and got a few of us, and you know, I think you look at Ships. Ships was excellent that year. Ships was, you know, so overweight, used to eat curries before games and got 5 pints a night, but he knew where the net was, and his hold-up play was fantastic. And he got probably a load of guys that were kind of, you're thinking, why has he signed Neil Shipley? You know, why has he signed 𝐍𝐸𝐵𝐿𝐵𝐿? He got David Unsworth in. There was a few of us that was misfits, really, but it just blended so well together, and we had a real togetherness, I think, because of that.
Were you able to push Neil Shipley off the ball in training and stuff like that?
I always picked Neil in my team. I didn't want to go near him. He was too big. He was too big. Him and Morgs. So Morgs would kick you one end, and then Ships would just knock you off the ball the other end. So if I was ever captain, they were my first 2 picks.
Yeah, fair enough. I understand that. So you scored a fair few goals for the Blades in that season. Does any stick out in your mind as like your favourite or your best?
I like that. I got 2 headers that year, and the first one was on debut, so everybody thought I was good in the air, which was absolutely not true. And I scored 1 more header in my time for the club, and that was just after my daughter Romy had been born, and we did the celebration on the halfway, the Barbados, the baby rocking one, and I've got a picture of that, and yeah, just talking about that makes my hair stand on him, because it was like she'd been born a few days before. And I'd said to Neil, I said, I'm going to score today. I didn't think I'd score a header, but I said, I'm going to score today. I can just feel it. And Julie did. And the celebration, because all the boys joining in, they knew what was coming. And Unsworth had said, if we do it, let's do the Barbados. And I'm like, I'm running towards halfway thinking, I hope the boys do it. I don't want to look an idiot.
Yeah.
And there's a decent 7 or 8 of us in a line. It's a pretty good little picture, that.
Yeah. How old is she now? Does it make you feel?
Oh, she's 16.
Yeah, time's
16.
flying.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to think. Yeah, so.
Do you know what? I was listening back to one of the other interviews that we did with the goalkeeper Mark Howard, and he said about riding that kind of wave after having a child. Is that a thing?
Yeah, you don't even know what you're doing. You don't even know what you're doing with the baby. You don't even know what you're doing with your life. It's just so weird. But you know that everything you are doing is for your kid. It's just a change of mindset. I don't know how you'd even explain it, but yeah, it's just you're kind of in a daze, really, and I don't know when you actually get out of it. It's probably a different time for different people, but I was in a daze for a while and probably didn't realise what was going on until we got to the Premier League.
Did you feel like your football was getting better and better as you kind of had a child, if you like?
I think so, and I think that was why it's so frustrating that I didn't play the following year, because I went away and Neil had said to me, like, you know, I didn't play at the end of the championship season, if you remember, the last sort of 3-4 games. He'd taken me out, and I was really disappointed. And I remember we played the game to go up, and I didn't play in that. And then the last game of the season, I think, was Leeds at home, maybe. And I didn't even get off the bench in that one, and I was pretty disappointed, because I think I had the most assists in the team, and I'd scored 9 goals. I think I was second top scorer, and I just felt like I should have had a few minutes in that, and didn't. So pretty disappointed. I spoke to him after the season and said, look, what do I need to do to play in the Premier League? And he said, you need to get fitter, you need to lose some weight, and you need to come back and prove to me that you're going to start that first game. And if you do, I'll give you a new contract. So I was like, right. So the summer I went so hard. I came back, I was in great shape, smashed all the testing we did and everything, and started the first game against Liverpool, obviously. So I went in to see him after the Liverpool game and said, you know, look, I've done what you've asked. Can I have my new contract? And he said, no, you need to do more. And I said, but hold on, you told me that if I start this game, that's it. And he said, no, I don't think you're going to be a permanent fixture in the team. You need to up it again. So I went away. I played the next couple of games, and then he was taking me on away trips. So I think I went to Fulham, wasn't in the actual squad, sat in the stand on my own. Then I went to Tottenham, same thing. And I was travelling all over the country, seeing all these lovely grounds, but not actually getting any minutes. And I spoke to Stuart McCall and said, look, who was the assistant at the time, and said, why is he just dragging me around everywhere? Like, you know, if he doesn't want me, can I just go, or can I go on loan? And at the same time, there was I think there was a Caribbean Cup in Barbados, and they called me up, and I went and saw Neil and said, look, if I'm not playing here, you might as well just let me go. And I went and played in that and did quite well. And other clubs came in for me at that stage, and obviously I moved on in January.
I find that really hard to not hard to believe, because obviously it happened, but hard for you. It must have been hard for you to take, because you're somebody who can come off the bench. You've got some pace. You are quick. You score goals. It's weird that he just didn't even want to bring you off the bench. Like,
yeah, that's what I
didn't put you on the bench.
Yeah, for me, I can understand why he didn't want to start me, because I was a bit of a luxury. Didn't always work the hardest. I was a confidence player, so needed to make sure my mindset was right. I was probably hard to coach, so I get all that. But I don't understand why he didn't have me on the bench for 15, 20 minutes, because I always felt that I could do something. There was games when we were playing, I'm sat there in the stand thinking, oh, I'd love to come on here. We're 1-0 down. What's the worst that can happen? We might lose 2-0 if I come on. And not to have the opportunity to come off the bench in the Premier League was a bit disappointing. And that's when I decided I'd move on, and I was going to a club I thought that were geared up to go straight back up. So it was almost like, well, I'll show you that I can still do it at the Championship and have another crack at the Premier League. And obviously that didn't end up happening, and he followed me to Palace. So we can talk about that in a minute.
Before we do talk a little bit more about your career, we're just going to say some names. We want your quick fire thoughts on each one, okay? So, 𝐍𝐸𝐵𝐝.
Oh, absolute beast.
He scored an absolute stunner against Wednesday.
The one against Sheff Wednesday is ridiculous. He was a very average finisher throughout his career, but he made so many chances with how strong he was. And I think he was a better player than most gave him credit for. But some of the things he used to be able to get out of with his strength were just ridiculous. And I've never seen a body like it. He had muscles that he grew muscles in places that I didn't even know you could grow muscles.
We've got another one here that's Neil Shipley, which we've already spoken about. So I'm going to throw a random one at you. Lillian Nellis.
Oh, Lil was a great guy. I lived in the hotel with Lil for about 6 weeks when we signed. What a great guy. Really, really nice guy. Never really got too many opportunities, actually. I mean, was obviously shipped off pretty quickly. But yeah, fantastic footballer. Probably not quick enough and didn't really suit Neil's style of play. And I think that's probably the only reason. But as a footballer, he could play.
What about Simon Francis?
Oh, another one. He had so much ability, ridiculous ability. And I absolutely thought there's no chance he'd ever do anything in the game. His attitude was awful. Wow. He always fell out with Warnock. It was just a mess. And to see him bounce back years later and play in the Premier League, I couldn't believe it. I honestly couldn't. Had all the ability in the world. And I'm really pleased. It's somebody that I'm really happy for, that he managed to find a way back, because I thought he was done.
How high dong?
Oh, get out of here.
I'm glad I asked that question. Go on.
The Chinese David Beckham. Oh.
Yeah, that's what they said, didn't they?
Yeah, the Chinese Dave from Peckham, I think they said. He was terrible. I know. I've looked at his record, and he had an unbelievable record for China, and back home he was great. And when I signed for Sheffield United, and they were in the middle of their tour, their Chinese tour. So I actually went and joined them over there, and he was hero worshipped everywhere. He got off the plane, and thousands of people just hi ho dong. He played in the games. He was rubbish. Yeah. He made one appearance, I think, as far as I know, and he bloody came on for me, and I was absolutely devastated. Like the boys were like, "There's no hi dog never plays for this club ever. No, he's never going to play." And then Neil bloody took me off and put him on. I was absolutely gutted.
That's a claim to fame if I've ever heard one.
Yeah, he's probably the most famous player you've ever played with, to be fair.
Yeah, I didn't play with him. I got taken off the worst part.
What about another man you have already mentioned, but I don't really know anything about him as a person, kind of off the field? David Unsworth.
Legend. What a guy. Oh, and his left foot. Oh, he was
so except for that Everton game.
Well, what about when he came back and scored the pen? Oh,
yeah. We'll not talk about that.
Yeah, for Wigan. Anyway, so yeah, Unzi played left back a lot of the time when I played right wing, and honestly, he could get it anywhere on the pitch and hit me without me having to move. He always used to say to me, as soon as I get it, just start running, and I'll put it in your path. And he did it so many times. He was such a good lad off the pitch as well. And the way he left Sheffield, he was really upset with how it went with Warnock. Because we'd been basically sort of banished to the reserves. We had an unbelievable reserve team. There was, you got Unzi, who's at England international. I think he'd had a cap, and there was a load of good players in that reserve team, and we were all pretty bitter at the way it had gone. And Unzi said, "Oh, there'll be a way to find my way back. Something will happen. Football's got a funny way of evening itself out." And I remember messaging him after the penalty, going, "Wow, you were absolutely spot on."
Yeah, absolutely right. And the thing was as well, we obviously went straight back down. If we'd have kept some of the players, like obviously you didn't want to be sat on the bench, but if we'd have kept players like yourself, like David Unsworth, we'd have probably gone straight back up. But,
yeah, I agree. I think he could have loaned me out. I think if he'd have said to me, "Look, I'll loan you out for 6 months, and then see how you go," I'd have taken that deal because I didn't want to leave. I loved Sheffield as an area. We had a house up there. We were really settled, really good bunch of people. So it was disappointing to leave, but I just wanted to play football. And if he wasn't going to loan me, I had to move.
Yeah, fair enough, mate. Fair enough. So, talking about your mates, you've obviously just spoken about Lily and Nellis. Who else were your big buddies at Sheffield United?
Probably Nick Montgomery and Jags were probably the two that really kind of just took me under their wing straight away and just showed me around the town and showed me the places to live. Nick had a rental property. I lived in his place for a little while, and they were brilliant to me, both of those two. Obviously the new signings as well, because you kind of, it's a little bit of you gravitate towards them because you know they're in the same sort of boat and they're probably feeling a little bit anxious, and you know we're supposed to be pros and got no problems and no issues and blah blah blah, but I think you all have the same sort of things going on. Are you good enough? Are you going to fit in? It's difficult being the new boy. So like I said, Lillian, Ships, Danny Webber had been there the year before, but Danny Webber and Steve Cabba, they were great. You had the Quins there that were good. Tongi, like honestly, there was nobody there at that time that I went, oh, he's a nearly every team I've ever been in. You're like, there's always somebody, and if you don't know who it is, it's normally you. I'm hopeful it wasn't me, but no, we were just a good bunch and a good bunch of people, and it was really easy to fit in.
Is there any United play or ex-Sheffield United players that you still keep in touch with?
Oh, Monty, I speak to all the time. Like Monty's over here. He's coaching. He's doing a fantastic job. He's probably got the smallest budget in the league, the youngest team in the league, and he's just producing player after player after player. Everybody thought he was kind of a lame duck when he got the job. He was going to be in and out. He used to play for the club, and it was just a sort of token appointment. Most were saying, but I know Monty well, and he would have loved hearing that because he'd have gone, right, I'll show you. And in my opinion, he should have got Manager of the Year. He's been fantastic, and been able to catch up with him on quite a few occasions. Caught up with him a couple of months ago when they came over to play the Wellington Phoenix, and he's no different to how he was back then. He's still a good lad, and we were just reminiscing much like we've done tonight and telling stories, and it was a pretty good catch up.
Yeah, we really like talking with Monty. I think he is a future Sheffield United manager.
I would agree with that. I think it's probably one of the only jobs he'd come back for, actually. And I think
that's pretty much what he said to us, didn't he?
Yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me at all. Like he loves Australia. His missus and kids love Australia, but I think it's similar for me though. Like there's only a couple of jobs I'd ever come back for. I'm not going to get those jobs, so it doesn't matter. But for Monty, I think he's on that career path, and I think that could be something that could happen in the future. And it helps.
Which are yours?
Newcastle United.
Which are your jobs?
Yeah, Newcastle. I'd come back for Millwall. I'd probably come back for Sheffield too. I loved it in Sheffield. If I can get my old house back.
All right, you'll have to call us Sheffield United though, so otherwise the fans will get on your back.
Yeah, true.
We got hammered. We got hammered at the Greg Halford podcast. He called the Sheffield all the way through, and we didn't want to kind of stop his flow, so we left it. And then in the comments, we got hammered.
Really?
We did.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Why? But there's only one team in Sheffield, so I don't need to say anything. Right?
Very good, very good.
Nice one, Paul. We love you. So you then signed for Palace. So how'd that go?
Yeah, so like I said, I'd not been playing. I went to see Neil and just said, look, can I go out on loan, or if you want to sell me, I completely understand. I'm not playing. There's no point me being here. He was cool. I had a phone call pretty quickly from my agent and said, look, you've got a choice really of Palace and Leeds. Now Leeds, going from Sheffield to Leeds, I thought, you've probably got to be absolutely on it and hit the ground running straight away, because you're not going to be given any second chances because you've come from Sheffield. But then Palace was always going to be a difficult one as well, because I'd been at Millwall. So both the choices were not particularly great, but I wanted to be closer to home. And in the end, I spoke to Dennis Wise, who was my former coach at Millwall, and he offered me 18 months. And then I spoke to Peter Taylor, and he offered me 2.5 years. And I just thought, I probably need a bit of stability now, and I just want to go and play. And Peter had said that you'll come down, you'll play if you're fit and doing what I know you can do. You'll be playing every week, and that's kind of what I wanted to hear. So he said that we're geared up to get back to the Premier League. We think we can do it this year, if not next year. So that was it. I went down and signed, and I remember the day leaving And I went in to see Neil and went to see the players, obviously. And I was in Neil's office and said, thanks for bringing me in and thanks for giving me my debut in the Premier League. I do appreciate it. And he said, just make sure you're a good boy down there because you don't know when I'm going to see you next. And I remember ringing my missus and I said, Warnock just said the weirdest thing to me, and she's like, "Do you think he's going to end up at Palace?" And I'm like, "I bloody hope not." But obviously he did, and I always remember the day. There was a rumor that he was coming. Obviously, Peter Taylor got sacked, and there was a rumor that Neil was coming. And all the boys were into me. What's he like? What's he like? And I'm telling all these different stories. And then turns out that he does sign, and we're all sat in the canteen, and we're waiting for him to come in. So he bowls in with Mick, his assistant, in tow. I think Keith Curl was his other assistant at the time, and he looks around at all the squad, and then he goes, "Oh, Ifill, I told you I'd see you soon." And all the boys just start cracking up, and then he starts talking about what they're going to do in the season, and then we go out and play his version of murder ball, where he just plays five-a-side games, and you put your pads on, and you just kick out of each other, basically.
Yeah, I've heard about these. I didn't think these things really happened. I thought it was just something that people made up. Like, what is the thinking behind that?
I think he just wants to see what your character's about. Like, because there's no hiding place. You put your pads on and he wants you to just go in and tackle people and win your headers and just be a nuisance, really. And straight away from that, you can pretty much see who is willing to put their foot in, who's a little bit scared. And he didn't want anybody like that around. If you're not willing to put your foot in and work hard for a Neil Warnock team, you're not going to play in a Neil Warnock team. And that was kind of it, really.
I was just going to say, for all the injuries we've had this season, all the bad luck we've had this season, could you imagine if it had come out in the papers that Paul Heckingbottom had said, "Right, lads, everyone get on a pitch, get your pads on," and we get like 3 broken legs or something like that?
Different times.
Different time, yeah. I don't know if you could get away with it now, but they said Bielsa was doing the same thing. So, but he's gone as well, so who knows?
Yeah. Good point.
Point. What's next for you then, Paul?
Out here, I'm still playing. I'm coaching. I keep saying it's going to be my last year, and then lace up the boots for a little bit longer. So I'm just coming off the bench now. I can't do 90 anymore at my age, but still enjoying it. Loving the coaching. Like I said earlier, there's so much to learn, so much to do, and I'm just kind of scratching the surface and learning my trade, really. So I think the hardest part of being a former pro is people expect you to know everything straight away. And I think it's almost easier when you haven't played because you're given that time to just sort of grow into your craft. And I think for me, starting at a lesser level was good. I was allowed to make a load of mistakes, and I did make a lot of mistakes, and still do, which is a good thing. But I think it's learning along the way and making sure you don't make the same mistake twice. Really, go and make a different mistake, which is one thing I have learned as a coach. So I think I'm still doing that, still getting better, and there's plenty more to come, I think.
Yeah, I can tell you're good at this, coaching malarkey. We wish you well, Paul Ifill. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today, and all the very best for the future.
No worries. Thanks, chaps.